If it's good enough for the British Museum, it's good enough for me, and probably for most other collectors as well. What I'm talking about specifically is Renaissance wax. So this is a product, it's the first time I'm using it, so I thought it would be interesting to get a noob kind of view on the product. Of course, people swear by it, so it must be a good product. It's mentioned even on the box here, on the can. So it's a refined waxes blended to a formula used by the British Museum and restoration specialists internationally. And apparently it should work on to protect and revive furniture, leather, paintings, metals, marble, ivory, etc. So all kinds of materials. I'm not sure, it doesn't have any like danger label in the sense of it's not like poisonous or toxic, but smells really strong, like some kind of paint thinner. So while there may not be any caution label, I would probably not ingest it. It supposedly dries instantly, and then you can apply multiple coats depending on what kind of how much shine you want it to have, or matte, like depending on what kind of look you want the object to have. And it basically creates this microcrystalline coat over your object, which protects it in kind of an airtight or anaerobic environment, I suppose, so in lack of air. I'm assuming this means that the object has to be cleaned beforehand. So many videos I've seen mention that it needs to be completely dry beforehand, so no humidity or moisture, because that obviously means that then this gets trapped underneath the layer of wax and it keeps rusting or corroding on the inside potentially. So I have a candidate sword to test this out on, and we'll get right into the new angle and get working. So I've thought long and hard on which sword would be the best candidate to start my experience with Renaissance wax. And this is because, well, my different considerations were I don't want something that is not potentially perfectly cleaned, because I don't want there to be traces of rust anywhere that can then keep working underneath. I don't want something that has heavy pitting or damage that may be complex to apply. So for the starting object, I wanted a kind of sword that was in very good shape, clean, without pitting, without rust. And I'm lucky enough to have the perfect candidate for that. This is my Swiss briquette from Solothurn. You probably have seen it in other videos because it's been featured quite a few times in my videos. But basically, the blade is practically flawless, I would say, apart from a couple of nicks on the edge, but there's no pitting, no corrosion, no rust whatsoever anywhere. It's in mint condition. The grip, of course, is brass, so that's not a problem at all. We will coat it anyway, perhaps, but the main focus now is the blade. I cleaned it up already and dried it, so I gave a last layer of oiling just to get any fingerprints, any traces of handling off and have it perfectly clean. And well, if we take a look at the Renaissance wax can, it mentions to apply with a soft cloth and to buff gently. So I have a new soft cloth right here. This is a cotton rag, so there's no risk of transferring any any contaminants, let's say. I tend to be overly cautious when I use stuff the first time, so I really, like, I'm sure that once I get comfortable using it, things will be way easier, and perhaps won't be the need to have a new rag every time I apply it. But I tend to be, yeah, as I mentioned, a little cautious the first time I use a product. So clean rag and new batch of Renaissance wax. So you should take a dab. I'm not sure how hard it is. I can't even tell. Yeah, you can see there's a little bit of wax there on the, I hope it's not too much. You can tell here, well, maybe I got a little too much. You can actually see I tend also to overdo it with things, but I think we'll be okay. And then as far as the application goes, I've seen a bunch of videos online and different people do it in different ways. Some use their finger, some use paper cloth, some use a like paper tissue, some people use a cloth like me now. So basically you just kind of run the wax. And let me tell you, I think you can feel it in the sense that you feel very little resistance. The cloth now is really gliding on the blade really easily. And just to kind of make sure, just to test that, I mean, it glides even on the side here, so I'm not sure it's the wax. I wonder. But basically, you run the wax on all of your surface, and then you buff it gently. Okay, I have to be careful with the tip. That's ripping my rag up. We'll apply a little bit more for the other side, just to be sure. This is, by the way, a very bad rag for the use I'm using it for, because it comes apart really easily. So now the tip has been just kind of shredding it to pieces. I put more wax up here. You can see it there right on the corner. So there we go. Just apply it. Making sure we also apply it on the edge. So we kind of want to make it airtight, I suppose. So the layer has to be consistent and covering the whole blade. And now we can let it rest. In theory, it dries instantly, but I'm curious about that. And then you can apply multiple layers if you want. So I think we'll leave it here for a few minutes and then apply perhaps a second coat. Okay, a couple of minutes have gone by, and well, at least according to the advertising on the can, it should have already dried. I have not tested it with my finger because I'm afraid it might be dirty and I don't want to leave a fingerprint. So I'll apply now a second run, a second coating. And once that dries, I think I'll feel a little more comfortable with potentially touching the blade and testing whether it's whether it's dry or not. It's also really hard to tell, I have to say, whether it's covered. I mean, I know, of course, that I coated it already, but it's hard. You don't see any leftover, like it's invisible. So it's kind of hard to tell. And as this is my first application of this product, I really don't know what's going to happen. So I'm kind of going a little bit heavy now with the second coat, just because I want to be sure that I'm getting every little nook and cranny. And if any of you have, a lot of experience, and not so much with the success of using Renaissance wax, but if you've had mistakes or learning experiences, I'd really be curious to hear what you have to say. But yeah, second coating is going on smoothly. Also, it says to buff out. I mean, but I don't know how much or to what extent they... So, I mean, I imagine, as with all things, it's a learning curve. I had kind of the same feelings the first times I used Autosol. You don't know how much you're comfortable using. You don't know what medium you should use to apply it. So everything is a little bit of a kind of exploration. So I want to make sure I get it here in the ricasso area, and then just kind of rub it all over the other side of the blade too. And we'll now let it dry and then check it out in a few minutes once it's completely dry. Okay, another few minutes have gone by and I devised what I hope will be a test. So we have a little bit of very light paper, you see here. And this paper hopefully will get like oily or wet if the blade hasn't dried up yet. So we'll just kind of run it along the blade like this. Just quickly take a look. And It feels perfectly dry to me, so I will assume the blade is dry. And let's let's do a touch test. I feel no grease on it. Like there's no, actually it feels really nice, because compared to a blade when it's oiled, which you feel it's always kind of wet and oily, this now feels really dry. So it should not leave fingerprints. So, and my understanding is that the more coats you apply, the shinier it becomes. So for example, now it's relatively matte. This is okay because this is how the blade is, so I don't need it to be more shiny. But let's say if you wanted it to shine more, or if you had like a perfectly polished blade, you can then apply multiple coats and kind of really bring that shine back out. I'll be monitoring it in the coming weeks and possibly months, just to kind of make sure that, you know, rust doesn't appear, and that if I touch it, fingerprints don't stick. And, you know, I mean, I have no reason to believe it wouldn't work. If all professionals in the industry use it, there must be a reason. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed it, and you should probably get a little can of it for yourself if you're into sword preservation. So have a nice day, and I'll see you in another sword video. Bye.